Welcome to United for Impact, a series from United Way of Delaware. Across this country, communities are coming together to solve some of our biggest challenges: ensuring children read on grade level, preparing the workforce of tomorrow, and supporting Alice and working families who are doing everything right but still struggling to get ahead. This series brings you real conversations with United Way leaders from across the nation who are driving bold solutions, forging powerful partnerships, and proving what's possible when communities unite around a common purpose. Because when we work together, impact doesn't just grow, it multiplies. So let's get started. I'm so excited this afternoon to have my colleague, Sen Garrett, with me. Sen, why don't you introduce yourself and tell the audience a little bit about yourself, including how long you've been with United Way?
Well, first of all, grateful to be with you and spend the time with y'all. So my name is Sen Garrett, and I'm the president and CEO of United Way of Metro Chicago. I've been in that role for almost 8 years, but I've had the privilege of leading the United Way in Charlotte, North Carolina, working at United Way Worldwide. Prior to that was at our United Way here in Chicago, and then started my career in Madison, Wisconsin at the United Way of Dane County. And so in total, I'm going on close to 21 years now with United Way.
Because you have worked at so many different United Ways, including United Way Worldwide, I thought you would be an excellent person to have some dialogue with this afternoon about how United Ways have pivoted and or transformed, right, to
Mhm.
stay relevant in today's environment. We are celebrating our 80th, and I have been looking back on, we've had four or five different names over
Yeah.
that time frame that I wasn't even aware of. And so people used to say, I'm not your, or we're not your grandfather's United Way. Talk to me about, from your perspective, how have you seen us pivot or transform, particularly with some relevancy for today?
It's interesting. I think about how you stay relevant, right? How do you change? And at some level, it's staying who you are, right? So when I think about who we are, it's always about being connected in community. It's about listening and working with community. It's about bringing different parts of the community together to a greater whole. So at some level, that has never changed. But what does that look like today versus what that might have looked like even when I started 20 years ago? It is very different. It used to be a very purely corporate driven kind of experience where folks would, run these big campaigns at workplaces around the country. Today, I think it's much more focused on kind of community needs. I think our experience in Chicago in particular is, first and foremost, we're driven by what our neighborhoods are asking for. And then how can we kind of weave that together with opportunities we see in the public sector and the private sector, et cetera. But it starts much more with that community voice. And then it's continues to help us connect other people to that, whether that be a company, whether it be an individual, whether it be a volunteer. I think there's just a lot more ways for people to engage today with United Ways. But our biggest change really has been that much more focus on the community itself, versus simply how do we raise those dollars and get them out. This is, what does the community need, and then how do we help bring those resources to bear?
Yeah, you bring up a good point. I was just reading our history, and it was talking about, several years ago, even when I started, people probably characterized us as we raised money and we invested it in programs and with partner agencies, versus today, we are part of the solution with not just our partner agencies, but
Yep.
as you said it, with public, with community. We are really more focused on how can we collectively solve for some social issues the same. And not everyone may realize that or see how they can help to be a part of the solution or join our organizations differently, particularly the Yesterday United Way. If you weren't part of a workplace campaign, or that's how they primarily reached us,
Yep.
right? So, how does that look different, you think, for people who are sitting outside of workplace campaigns that may or may not um, are connected or know who we are, or maybe they ran a campaign yesterday and their organization doesn't anymore? How are you finding ways to still engage them?
I think going back to kind of who we are, right? And if the 4 times, if you will, people thought about us as a bushel of 150 or 200 organizations that you were investing in, and we still invest in a lot of different organizations, but today that investment for us here in Chicago, as an example, is about 18 neighborhoods, and we really focus on specific neighborhoods, working in partnership with neighborhoods. So what does that mean for our partners and donor partners and others? They're vested in these neighborhoods. And so they raise their hand and say, hey, I want to be a part of this. And so we have examples now of, individuals who have never been involved with United Way before, but they're so committed to one of these 18 neighborhoods, and they see the model that we've been able to put in place, and they say, I want to be involved in that. And while they might have said historically we don't do United Way, right? You've always probably heard that. I don't do United Way. Okay, fine. Do you do this neighborhood? Or you care about this neighborhood? And people do. People are really vested across our city. And so we've been really grateful to see, whether it be as volunteers, whether it be as donors, whether it be our public sector partners, private sector partners. I mean, people are really raising their hand to say, this is what I think I can bring to bear for this neighborhood. Is that in line with what the plan is? And that plan has really helped shape ways for folks to engage beyond just the traditional campaign. We still love, if you want to run a campaign, great, let's go do that. But we have a lot more other ways for people. We even have businesses now that are starting businesses in neighborhoods as part of their way to be part of the change that's taking place in our community.
I think that's really important because it's how we're showing up,
Yeah.
right? I would say, at least for our United Way 27 years ago, we didn't necessarily show up in community like we're showing up today. We didn't necessarily engage community, or listen to community and find ways to be able to connect. And so I want our listeners to know that there are lots of ways that they can be a part of the change that's happening across the country, right? Within our network, within our systems, we want them to show up. We want their voices. We want them to be working alongside of us and creating strategies in order to help us to solve for these issues, because most of them, right, are too big, too broad, too
Yep.
deep for any one organization or sector or industry to try to solve on their own. Is really going to take all of us. We try to say we focus a lot on the third grade reading. Huge advocate for me. I'm saying I need everyone that can have any part of this solution to join us and bring to the table your gifts, your talents, your thoughts, your strategies, your resources. And I think it looks different today, and I think it might look different tomorrow.
As you're speaking, one of the things that came to mind for me was a time actually when I was in Charlotte, and I was pretty new in the role there, and I was asked to speak. There's this breakfast club that happens every week, and it's a historic African American neighborhood in Charlotte, and so they asked me to come speak at it, and I was like, great, I'm going to talk about the history. And halfway through, the kind of matriarch of this program interrupted me and said, Sean, you got to understand, we're with you. You got to just convince those people with money to come around because you've always been part of our neighborhood. And it was striking to me was just like she felt ownership of United Way. And for so long, I think our anchoring had been towards those that were investing, and those were the owners of United Way. And what she really helped me clearly understand was like, no, the community and the neighborhoods own United Way. And then we bring so many other people as part of that who can then own it as well. And it's not one owner or another, but frankly, everyone doing that part. And it was really cool to have that experience, and just see that passion that this woman who, she was at that time, I think she was 92 years old. So she was literally kind of the age of our United Way, and she had seen it all. But she was so clear that she said, this is, we believe in this. We believe in you because you have been with us for, in that case, her whole life. And she just said, we just got to get more people to come along with us so that we can do great things in the neighborhoods and across our communities. And I think that's true in every city in America where there's someone who feels that ownership, and it's just our job to help connect those pieces.
So we're just coming off of amazing student empowerment summit that we do across. So it's statewide. It represents all the districts in our state. We have some fun and competition with it, with the most students that attend win for their specific districts. But When we were debriefing last week, that was my point to staff, as well attended as it is. And as energized it is for the students, I said, I want to make sure it doesn't come across as it's a United Way of Delaware student
Yeah.
empowerment. We want it just to be a Delaware
Yeah.
student empowerment summit. We want the school districts to feel like they own it, the schools to own it, our partners to own it, the Department of Education to own it. We want everyone who showed up, all of the vendors, all of the adults in the room and volunteers, we want them to feel like it's theirs. And that's
100%.
much different today than it
Yeah.
was yesterday, right? And a lot of times I feel like we have to put our brand on everything versus now is less to me about the brand than it is about us working to unite community. And we have an opportunity, I think, to do it at a much bigger scale and capacity where everyone feels like it's theirs.
Growing up, my father used to say to me that success has lots of parents, but failure is an orphan. And his, point of constantly reminding me is that if you try to go it alone, and I think at times United Ways have done that, right? We're going to do this. It's United Way or boss. It's hard, and that's not how you change the human condition. That's not how you change neighborhoods. But if you do it in a way that shares that credit and even gives the credit to others, it almost comes back to you in ways you never expected. And that's been one of the things we've really tried to do, whether it be the work I've done in Charlotte or nationally or, here in Chicago. What I always joke with our team, and the marketing folks don't love this, but I said, you should be able to replace the word United Way in everything we write with the word community. And it should
Mm.
still be true. And if you can do that, that means we're telling our story the right way, because ultimately it's not United Way's success that we're trying to put forward. It's our community's success. And we are a conduit to make that happen. And there's lots that we do that we should take credit for. We shouldn't be afraid of that. But it's ultimately about the success of our community. And we're really a reflection of our community and its interests to try to make things happen. And we've really tried to hold to that. And I think you're seeing that across the country where folks really are trying to work together to make things better.
I'm going to borrow that. I wasn't going to say steal it, right? But that's
You
the
can
one
steal
thing
it.
I love about this network too, right? Is when we get together, we're all doing the same things, but just within our local communities, and we don't have to. I always say if someone has a great idea, someone probably already has it, and so
100%.
we freely give within the network to help to accelerate the work, right? In other communities where we can easily replicate it. So when I took that and share it with my marketing committee, I'll give you credit for it in the beginning, but after that, I'm just going to own it.
Hey, if it works, it's all your idea. If it doesn't work, then blame me.
Yeah, that's back to that orphan story,
Uh-huh.
right?
100%.
So, what's one of the things that keeps you up at night?
I worry a lot about my kids are, 14 and 12, and I worry a lot about what the world is going to be for them. And I think about it as a parent, and then I think about it in the context of our jobs. And um, the world is getting increasingly complicated. It's getting increasingly polarized. We're dealing with, the governor said to us the other day, he said, I've been in office for 7 years. Every one of them has been unprecedented. I'd like a precedented year. And, that takes a toll on people. And it's hard to think about, like, what does that future look like? And so that's something I think a lot about. I worry about for my kids. I worry about for the kids, across our community, is what is this future going to be for them? These kids are figuring out stuff. Like, they're coming through with different ideas, and they've got ideas of how to make their community stronger and better. And we see that every day. You were talking about your empowerment summit, and I'm sure you had great ideas there. And so I worry about it, but then I also am like, they're going to figure it out a way. They figured out how to get through COVID. And my kids would look back and say that, those weird years where they were working from home all the time were some of the best years they've had. And so they adapt. And they're really proud of those time periods.
So, when you think about COVID, what's maybe one lesson that your United Way learned that you're still carrying through today?
That was a moment where people understood in real terms the power of doing things together. We launched in partnership with our the Community Trust, which is our community foundation here in Chicago. We launched our region's COVID fund, and we didn't just do it co-branded. We did it integrated. The lead people from each of our teams, they basically worked together for 4 months as if they didn't know whose team was which. Money was coming in left and right. We were coordinating, meetings with all of philanthropy on a weekly basis to make sure everybody was on the same page. And, obviously during that time period, we're all focused on the same thing. And today it's a lot more fragmented, but there's still a lot of those kind of lessons of we have to operate more integrated. We can't just say, hey, this is good for our brand, you do your brand. And we're all trying to do the same thing. And I think that has really been one of the changes we've seen in Chicago is just a little bit of lowering that ego for all of us and saying, this is about community. And we've got to figure out ways to do it together, not just to make the community foundation stronger, United Way stronger, Foundation X stronger, but this is about the community. And if we do those things, people return that value back to us. And that's what we saw during COVID. We were able to raise a lot of money. More importantly, we were able to do a lot of really good things with those resources. But that change of how we do things, that working together, that has really lasted. And to look back now, what, 5, 6 years later, and to say we're still doing a lot of the things the same way as we did during COVID, it's something that we're really proud of.
So you had mentioned earlier, and I had said, we've evolved over the last 80 years, is that um, the environment. You were talking about, thinking about your young kids as I sat back and watched and heard from so many young people across our state a couple weeks ago at the summit with my own granddaughter who is 14. They get their noise, they get their news, they get their information from all over the place, right? And they get it from people who are on the left wing or right wing, right? And people who are in between. And so some days, even for my own team and staff, like, I remind them I'm the hope dealer or that we should be the hope. Therefore,
Mhm.
they are hope dealers. Like we
Yep.
need to be the hope dealer. And so, because on some days it gets people really down, we started
Yeah,
something called Feel Good Friday during COVID because there was so much bad news coming at people all the
yeah,
time. And so that became our newsletter that we intentionally look for good news in our state and we intentionally look
that's awesome.
for ways to be able to communicate that across the state, which we've kept. But what gives you hope?
What gives me hope is seeing the work actually take place, seeing the wins. I'll give you an example from here in Chicago, but I know we've got, we can cite examples from all over the country and the world. But the west side of Chicago, if you turn on national news, it paints a picture of what it's like. But what the national news isn't covering for you is over the last 5 years in the neighborhood of Austin. So this is about 7, 8 miles west of downtown Chicago. It's a neighborhood that is rich in tradition, and it's a proud neighborhood. But it's a neighborhood that's lacked investment, and during the 50s and 60s and 70s, really suffered with violence that has carried through. But over the last 5 years, really 6 years, they've turned the tide, and they have been able to generate, and we're really proud to be kind of the lead partner around this work, over $200 million of public and private investment that has resulted in new programming, but it's also resulted in physical changes in the neighborhood. So one of the most notable is a school was closed about 11 years ago. There were 50 public schools across Chicago that were closed, and this was one of them. It takes up a whole city block, and it had been closed for 10 years. The neighborhood said, we're going to change that. And collectively, and we were a very significant piece of this, we raised $45 million and have turned it into a workforce innovation center that has a bank in it. It has one of our large industrial companies has a facility down the street where they're now training people at this former school to be able to work in this manufacturing facility. And it's been returned to the community, and it's vibrant, it's beautiful, and it's a reminder that bad things happen. And yet, when the community comes together, great things can come from that. And every time I'm there, and I luckily get to go there a lot, it's inspiring. And to know that a community said this is what we want to see to be different, and then we were able to partner with them to say, well, let's help you bring those resources, those partnerships, and the know-how to get this done. It's really cool to see, and that's just one example of what's taking place across that neighborhood, where you're seeing lots of those types of investments. That's really changing it and making it a place that people want to be and grow, versus a neighborhood that had been losing population for some time. And so that's, to me, that gives me hope in knowing that that's taking place all across Chicago, and I know it's taking place in communities all across our country.
I want to thank you, Sean, for joining me. I echo that. It's what we do when we get to actually see it. It was a little simpler, but on this past weekend, what gives me hope is I always say the community.
Hmm.
And we did an event where we did a summer camp enrollment all in one place for parents. But we also were able to have assistance for utilities. And my team
Yeah.
shared while they've been doing this for the last several months with utilities assistance, they actually got to help people on the spot in person. And they were like, it was nothing like it to see the how grateful people were to be able to get assistance and the fact that our organization was making a difference and helping parents who would not normally be able to afford summer camps to be able to have that. But it's not just the investment, it's about connecting the investment back to helping working families, helping investments to help our kids use summer as a time to accelerate in its growth. What I love and what gives me hope is our system and our network that is more than, as you mentioned earlier, is more than a dollar. Is
Yeah.
more than money. We need money to fuel the work, but it really is about the people and the communities and the bridges that we're able to build and the tables that we're able to set for everyone to come together in order to bring real change. And so I want to thank you again for the conversation, for the dialogue, and just for being a thought leader with us here at United Way of Delaware and within the network to bring real change to real people in a time when they need it most.
No, well, thank you for the opportunity. Thanks for everything that you do in Delaware and really across our network. We're grateful to be your partner, and we always get to learn from you and so many other great leaders around the country. And just grateful to be a part of this network.
Thank you for joining us for United for Impact. At United Way of Delaware, we believe real change happens when communities come together to solve problems that no one organization can tackle alone. If this conversation inspired you, share this episode, subscribe to the channel, and join us in building stronger readers, a prepared workforce, and a future where every Alice working family can thrive. Because together we just don't imagine a better future, we build it. Communities united, futures transformed. See you next time.